Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. Reminiscent of the strike which took out Iranian General Qasem Soleimani under President Trump outside the Baghdad airport, another U.S. drone strike 4 years later explodes the vehicle in which a high-ranking Kataib Hezbollah commander was riding in the Iraqi capital, killing him. The commander is believed to have been directly involved with attacks across the region which have injured American troops. The precision strike hit at about 9:30 p.m. local time in the Mashtal neighborhood of eastern Iraq. U.S. officials say there were no civilian casualties, but they also admit that Iraqi officials were not given advance notice of the strike. That's important as tensions between the two nations continue to fray. The U.S. blames the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, which is a group of Iranian-backed militias in the country, for the fatal attack on American troops in Jordan. Since mid-October of last year, there have been a documented 170 attacks against U.S. troops across Iraq and Syria, largely coming as blowback against U.S. support for Israel in its war with Hamas. But as this tit-for-tat game of strikes and retaliatory strikes escalates, some veteran groups argue that the Biden administration could be doing more to protect exposed troops deployed in the region, instead of leaving them as sitting ducks. Joining us now to discuss is John Burns, a senior advisor for Concerned Veterans of America. John, thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me on again, Kara.
So as I was mentioning a moment ago, do you think it's irresponsible to leave our troops in the crosshairs like this?
It's highly irresponsible. If you look at what's happened just in the past few weeks, we're a little short of 2 weeks that 3 U.S. troops were killed by a drone strike on the Jordanian-Syrian border, right? So troops in this region. Turns out it's worse than that. It's not just U.S. troops, but it's 3 U.S. Army reservists, non-combat engineer MOSs, non-combat engineer specialties, who were called from their civilian life and posted there in the Syrian-Jordanian desert for what I can tell is little to no reason to protect U.S. national security, U.S. national interests. And this administration seems like they're kind of moonwalking us backwards into another conflict, and yet they haven't gone to Congress to ask if the American people support this.
It's the same old story, unfortunately. So do you think some of those troops right now who are in harm's way, should they be redeployed elsewhere?
The troops certainly at that installation should be redeployed home. A little research, they're U.S. Army Reserve engineers out of Georgia, and they're U.S. National Guard military police out of Arizona. Those, again, weekend warriors. I've been there. I've done that. I've done it when I thought there was a national interest involved, and there really wasn't. I've done it when I knew there was no national interest involved, when I was in the Marine Corps back in the 90s and I was in Somalia. And, we lost a very young Marine there when we were trying to help people. This administration should not be putting U.S. troops at risk in Iraq, in Syria, on the Jordanian border for anything less than U.S. national security interests. In addition to those 3 young Army soldiers, we lost 2 Navy SEALs conducting operations nearby just a few weeks before that.
That we did. And so you were also on your social media citing some defense priority polls. What do they show about how Americans, just American citizens in general, feel about us still having U.S. troops in the region?
Well, they show that there's not a whole lot of support for it. And the more casualties we see, the less support there will be. Right now, it's kind of 40-40, one way or the other, because we've had almost 5 casualties. I'm curious, because our friends at Defense Priorities do a great job, and this poll just really opened my eyes that getting the message out that Americans are really not ready to be slow walked into a war, that they want Congress to weigh in and make the decision, not the president, not Joe Biden, not this administration by itself. They want Congress to weigh in. But our friends at Defense Priorities had to do a poll, and you have to make some decisions. I wonder what people would say if you asked them, how many U.S. Army reservists, how many U.S. Army National Guardsmen would you be willing to pull from their civilian lives and allow them to be killed or allow them to be wounded? We saw 41 wounded in action in that strike. Some of those were the National Guardsmen. Some of those were, again, the Army reservists. But again, almost everyone on that base, and we have no public explanation for why we're on that base. I have some ideas, but we have no public explanation for why we're on their base, and certainly no reason that part-time reservists and National Guardsmen are there at risk in the enemy sites, basically serving as a target, a practice target for Iranian terrorist group sponsored drones.